Hello students, today we are going to focus on the chapter of consolidation of British rule. In this chapter, I would first like to introduce the consolidation of British rule and explain it to you what that was. The consolidation of British rule refers to the period of time during which the British government established its control over various regions around the world. In particular, the consolidation of British rule in India is a significant historical event that occurred during the 19th century. The British East India Company had established itself in India in the early 17th century, primarily for the purpose of trade. However, over time, the company began to exercise increasing control over Indian politics and administration, eventually leading to direct rule by the British government. The consolidation of British rule in India was marked by a series of events and policies such as the introduction of English education, the imposition of British laws and governance, and the suppression of Indian uprisings and rebellions. We will now study about Queen Victoria and her role in the British rule. Queen Victoria's proclamation, also known as the Proclamation of 1858, was a royal announcement issued by Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom on November 1st, 1858. The proclamation declared the direct rule of the British Crown over India after the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Indian Mutiny, which had resulted in the overthrow of the British East India Company's rule over the country. In the proclamation, Queen Victoria promised to govern India with justice, tolerance, and respect for the diverse cultures and religions of the Indian people. The proclamation also announced the abolition of the East India Company's rule and the transfer of power to the British Crown. The Proclamation of 1858 marked a significant turning point in the history of India as it signaled the beginning of the British Raj, which lasted until India's independence 1947. Now let's study about the Government of India Act 1858. The Act was an important piece of legislation that marked a significant turning point in the history of India. It was enacted by the British Parliament after the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which had shaken the British rule in India to its core. This act abolished the East India Company's role in the governance of India and transferred the administration of the country to the British Crown. The act also abolished the dual system of governance that had existed in India, under which the company's officers had held both civil and military powers. It established a new system of governance that separated the executive and legislative functions, with the Governor General of India acting as the executive head and the Indian Council as the legislative body. The Act also allowed Christian missionaries to propagate their faith in India. It also abolished the East India Company's monopoly on trade with India and allowed private merchants to trade freely in the country. Overall, the Act marked the end of the East India Company's rule in India and the beginning of direct British rule. So the Government of India Act 1858, we can summarize in following points. How did it affect? It transferred the government from East India Company to the British Crown, Indian territories to be governed in the name of British Queen. Control and authority over Indian administration was given the Principal Secretary of State. It abolished dual government. Governor General, Viceroy became the rep of British in India. Indian civil services was to be created. Ended the doctrine of lapse. Made India a direct British colony.